Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Frank McNeil, and I'm with PNC Bank and one of the co-chairs for this Mayor's Task Force on Safe Art Space. And we welcome you this afternoon. To my right is John Lauria. Hello. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon, and we appreciate your being here to help us add some meat to some of the things that the mayor would like for us to do. I think everybody has a handout in front of them. If you don't, they're back at the table. But we need to keep our focus on those issues as we look at trying to provide safe, livable work, performance, and living space for artists, emerging artists, as well as established artists. So if you can keep that in mind as we go along, that's the idea for us this afternoon. So before we get started with the rest of the meeting, because we want to give you as much time as possible to provide us with your comments, we need to acknowledge our task force members who are joining us here around the table, tables in front of you. So if we can start, Michael, would you start on your end, just to tell everybody who you are, just a quick introduction.
Yeah, my name is Michael Huber. I'm the City Council President as well.
My name is Dan Deacon. I'm a musician, and I'm on this staff.
I'm Lou Zay. I work at the Contemporary.
I'm Stuart Watson. I'm an owner of Area 405, and I'm an artist.
John
Lewis from the Harbor Bank of Maryland.
Jeannie Howe with the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance.
Elisa Blount Moorhead. I'm at Station North Arts, and I'm an artist.
And we just had the councilman join us.
Councilman Stover, 12th District.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for introducing yourselves. So those folks are part of the task force and were asked to join the task force by the mayor. And again, I think everybody has the charge in front of them. If they do not, let us know that so that we can get that in front of you. Excuse me just a second. Grab that. So one more. So once again, let me reiterate what the mayor has asked us to do so we can keep our thoughts and our comments focused on that. So the mayor has created this task force as a network of safe, cost-effective, contemporary, living, live-work, studio, and performance spaces for emerging and established artists. So we're tasked with coming up using the perspective of artistic design, development, financial, regulatory, and revitalization experts to develop the strategies, identify resources, and propose a programmatic framework with the idea of developing and sustaining spaces that protect the safety of artists and patrons while meeting the logistical and technical interests of today's performers and audiences. So that's the task that we've been given, and that's where we've been focusing so far. We've established 3 different work groups to come up with suggestions on how we should meet those needs. So our first work group is artist space needs. We have code and regulatory issues, and then project finance and development. So as you talk to us today, if you don't mind, John's reminding me we should introduce the work group leaders. Jeannie Howe is, Jeannie, where's your, there we are, Jeannie? Jeannie's leading our project, I'm sorry, you're leading the artist space needs. And then Amy Bonnets is working with the code and regulatory issues. And then Dana Johnson, Dana, raise your hand again, working with project finance and development. The idea, again, is that we come up with ideas on how to meet those needs, and no idea is too small. And if you know of ideas that we should consider, make sure we know those as well. And then lastly, I would encourage you, if you have some great ideas that you want to share, we've got laptops in the back for you to fill out a survey so that you can add comments to the task force and help us come up with the ideas that we need to present to the mayor. And then also, if you'd like to get involved with one of these work groups, we have a website that will have a listing of all the dates for the meetings so that you can join if you'd like to do that. Now I'm going to hand it over to John because he's going to cover the charge for this afternoon.
Thanks, Frank, and thank you everybody for being here. I just want to try and establish some expectations and ground rules so we can have the maximum amount of input in a organized and focused way. We have, and I know a number of people here have been at task force meetings, we always have an opportunity for public input at the end of our agenda, but the task force wanted to have a larger forum that was advertised on social media and elsewhere so that people could come and express to the full task force their perspectives, their concerns, their questions. So that's what this is about today. And we have asked you in the flyer and I think we've got it taped up there on the desk, to focus on a couple of issues. And those are, what kind of living, working, or performing space do you need that is currently lacking or unavailable in Baltimore? And what ideas do you have about how Baltimore can provide space that meets these needs? Frank and I are going to try and keep folks focused on that. Because of the practical constraints of having hopefully a number of people who want to speak, we're going to limit comments to 3 minutes. We're going to try not to be we'll cut you off in the middle of a sentence, and hopefully that will work in terms of getting your comments on the record here. We have other ways of getting your input, including both the survey that is going to be posted on our website, which you can fill out, and we'll be getting all of that information. There will also be on the website a comments section where, beyond the survey, you can just offer any comments or thoughts that might be outside the scope of the survey. We'd strongly recommend that if you are willing to take a few minutes to do the survey, that you do it. You can do it here in the back on the laptops. There are hard copies as well that are available at the back. And again, you can do it on the website, and you can also provide, as I said, some comments outside the scope of the survey. So there will not be any shortage of opportunity for people to comment, but we did want to have this opportunity for face-to-face, and of course there may be questions from the task force. So we're going to try and limit everybody to 3 minutes, and we'll give you the heads up when your time is about to expire. As I said, the survey is available in the back, and I think with that, we do want to get started. So we have a list of people who have signed in. Some of you have indicated you don't want to speak, but perhaps you're here just to listen, and that's fine, and we'll try and skip you. If I call you and you did not intend to speak, just say don't want to speak, and we'll just go on to the next person.
Excuse me, John. I'm sorry. I just wanted to remind everybody or let them know that the survey is anonymous. We're not collecting any data about names on the survey or about locations of space. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Thanks. So, like I said, we would ask you to focus your comments because time is limited. Believe me, the task force knows all too well, and the mayor knows all too well about the importance. This is Housing Commissioner Michael Braverman, who's also a member of the task force. Thank you, Commissioner. The mayor and the task force know all too well about the importance of the artistic and artist community to Baltimore in all of its splendor and glory. We are very committed to doing everything we can to facilitate its continued existence, its growth, and for that reason, I would ask you to try and refrain from those sorts of comments. We are all on the same side here. We're all trying to figure out how to make these spaces work for existing artists, for emerging artists, and for the artist community in general. So since the time is a little precious, I would just ask that you focus as much as possible on what it is that you need and what ideas that you might have for us to consider as we go through our process. We are expecting to make a recommendation to the mayor sometime in the middle of this year, and the three groups are working very hard on it. If you're interested in attending future task force meetings, the website that is listed on the bottom of the handout in the back has a schedule, it has members of the task force, it has a description of the groups, and an email address as well if you have any other further questions. So with that, I think we're going to get started. I'm just going to go in the order of the list as people signed in. The first is Doreen Bolger. Doreen, are you?
I only have one comment, which is I hope that affordability can be added to the list of desirable aspects of the workspaces.
Doreen, you're saying affordability? Yes, we've talked about that, and we appreciate that. And I'll just repeat Doreen's recommendation that we make sure to focus on affordability. The questionnaire, the survey asks people what they're paying currently, and we're very sensitive to the need for it to be affordable. Okay, the next person who is signed in is Allison Clendaniel.
Well, that's me. I wasn't expecting to speak, but...
You'll need to, can you come up to the microphone?
I wasn't expecting to speak, but I will say this. I do hope that we're just revitalizing old spaces, not spending a lot of time demolishing current Baltimore structures. That's my comment.
Thank you. Next on the list is Richard Gorelick on behalf of the Baltimore Improv Group. Richard?
Yeah, I can say something. Just in case no one thought of it, it would be helpful if there were a resource online or otherwise of already extant performance spaces, along with contact information and capacity and other things like that, because there might be spaces already that are available in various colleges and schools that we don't know about. So simply having an online catalog of those would be a good idea. So that's for the first committee.
Thank you. Jeannie, do you want to just mention for a moment the GBCA's website, which starts to, please?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. So there is a website called Space Finder Baltimore. It's a part of the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance's programs, and it is an online tool that was created by Fractured Atlas to match artists to venues, and it can be just a place where you go and look for the specifications that space has, but there's also some online booking tools there as well. And I'd just like to make a pitch if there is anyone here who has space or knows of folks who have space. We're trying to, it only started in July. We have well over 100 sites on it already, but we'd like it to grow further.
That's great. Space Finder?
Space Finder Baltimore Space Finder, excuse me, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a problem we can solve in real time? No, that's a great resource, and it's a terrific start on that, a very important topic. Okay, next on the list is Corinne Litchfield. Corinne?
I have 3 words for
Just
you.
pull that over so you don't have to.
3 words for you that I think would be a great model to start with. Write a House. This is a program that was started in Detroit in 2013. Some of you may already be familiar with it. The concept was that they would renovate vacant homes in the Hamtramck community of Detroit and create a grant application program in which writers of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry could apply to get one of these homes. Since then, they have given away 3 homes to writers. As I understand it, they are looking to revamp their program to include multifamily dwellings. This program has solved 3 problems in Detroit, which are fairly similar to problems that, or challenges is a word I usually prefer to use instead of problems. Familiar to residents of Baltimore: vacant housing, providing safe space for artists, and providing jobs. They have a program called Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice that provides job training provided in construction trades. Their apprentice program is through that group. So it seems to me that kind of looking to see what this nonprofit has done and what they're looking to do, maybe consulting with them might provide some really great insights for the task force and for Baltimore going forward.
Thank you. And will you give us that information? Could you, Andrew, in the back, just make sure he has
Sure.
at least the basics, although it sounds like it's all pretty findable?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Andrew, you'll
Will do.
connect with Corinne?
Thank you.
Good. I'm sorry, Stuart has a question?
Yeah, no, can I ask a question? What was the timeline for those houses to be, and to be accessed and then lived in? Do you know?
I'm not particularly familiar with that. I applied to the program when it first came out.
I'm sorry, which was when?
That would have been 2013.
Oh, great.
So, and I'm here, so I didn't get one of the houses, but it was incredibly competitive. I am glad to be here, though. I'm very glad to be in Baltimore. I believe they renovated maybe over a 6-month period. They did keep track of it on their blog. They did fundraising campaigns, because this was all nonprofit. The fact that this would be coming from the city, there would be particular advantages and possibly some disadvantages to that. But
Great,
so,
thanks.
does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Can I just make a suggestion for, I know Write a House really well,
okay.
and it's akin to the sort of dollar program, and we've been looking at quite a few models and obviously appreciate hearing about more models, but maybe through the survey process, if people can, somewhere in the survey, make comments about models that you think are effective for one reason or another. We have quite a list, but it's probably not exhaustive, so that would be a great way for us to shortcut some research work if people want to include it there.
Okay, definitely.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The mayor has asked us specifically to look for best practices. Ideas from elsewhere that could be used here directly or adapted for here are great. So if you have those kinds of suggestions, we're already aware of some, but the more the better. Okay, next on the list is Ellen James. Ellen from Central Baltimore Partnership. Do you want to speak? Okay. Next is, I can't tell. It says Bill, and I can't.
That's Bill Gilmore.
Oh, it is it? Yeah. Would you like to speak? Moving on, Eva Wingren from the Baltimore Community Foundation. Is it Eva or Ava? Sorry.
Eva. Thanks, everyone. And I am mostly speaking as a private individual, so sorry for any confusion, although the Baltimore Community Foundation is definitely very interested in this issue. We are conducting strategic planning right now. We heard from a number of the folks on the task force during the process of seeking community input. So I'm actually speaking as somebody with experience doing federal housing policy advocacy in DC, and a lover of the arts, and having tracked these artist housing models for a long time. There was a study done of artist housing in Minnesota by one of the preeminent developers of artist housing, and they found that white people were overrepresented in artist housing compared to other low-income housing and compared to the low-income population as a whole. So that brings up questions in artist housing of who is encouraged to be an artist, who is financially able to be an artist, who can get their art past the gatekeepers, who are defining whether you're enough of an artist. So as we consider this issue and how it plays out in Baltimore, I just hope that we keep that larger context in mind as well. I have also talked to a lot of working artists over the years, not just in Baltimore, who said, that seems like a great model, but it will never be affordable to me. And So I have been thinking about, like, what are the ways to give artists access to the kind of, like, equity and appreciation that many of the rest of us would be able to get out of owning property. So I think that it would be cool to look at some models such as Habitat for Humanity uses, like sweat equity, putting work into making the space what you want it to be, which we've already seen people are, definitely willing and ready and already doing. And just they lack the access to the capital. Like that seems to me to be a big part of the conversation. So, and I saw that ownership was in the survey, so that's excellent. Definitely know a lot of artists who ownership is a critical component for them. And also, if we're looking at a program that is going to be sustainable over the long term and going to be able to meet the needs of different artists as those needs change, looking at something that uses market forces, such as like a capital-based approach, I think will benefit Baltimore. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are looking at ownership models, including co-ops and other things that would be able to develop some equity. So thank you for those comments in particular. Okay, next is it Kat Woodhead? Yes? Okay, moving on. Alice Suyun Kim?
Oh, I actually had all of my students. I thought it was just.
Okay, no, it's no problem.
They were
But
here. I had them all sign in.
But in case they're inspired, we don't want to deny them. So, okay, same for, is it Yi Fu? Sorry, I can't read the last name. Shall I'll just continue. Jackie, another Micah student. Can't read it. Jackie Tang, I'm sure. But again, no problem. Okay, Aaron Mabin, Project Mayhem. Aaron, are you here? There we go.
I've already met or spoke to most of the members of the task force at some point or another, so I won't take up too much time with what I have to say today. But specifically, I wanted to touch on a point that was made a little bit earlier. While I might not be familiar with a lot of their outside work that I wasn't a part of when I was a kid, at 11 years old, I was actually partnered with Habitat for Humanities, and I had won a local art competition, and as a reward for that competition, they commissioned me to do a mural that hung on the wall of North Avenue in St. Paul for a few years, and that was a great experience. But a lot of children had partnered with them during that time in different areas of the city. And I just think that when we look at these all-encompassing models and we look at issues that are sure to be prevalent, like inclusion and making affordability and access to working artists and our youth who are deprived of a lot of these opportunities in their own schools and in their neighborhoods, having a part of that model that encompasses having youth and having young artists that are emerging, giving them opportunities to beautify the city. Once the investment is made in certain materials and stuff like that, it's pretty easy to go district by district and give kids that are really passionate about the arts and really passionate about their craft opportunities to become agents of change in their own community by contributing to the beautification of their communities. And I think that just that opportunity and being able to have stuff like that available to the kids who might not necessarily be trying to get their own studio space but need to have those talents cultivated and things like that, we have to include their perspective and their futures in whatever plans that this committee that this task force is going to recommend to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for your prior participation as well. And Bill, I was going to ask Bill from BOPA's perspective, if we're talking about public art, perhaps.
Yeah, we have a program called Art at Work. This is going to be our third year. We partner with Jubilee Arts and Youth Works, and we hire 80 youth every summer to work with professional muralists. So keep an eye on that. It's on our website.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Next, these again are MICA affiliates, so Destiny Belgrave. No thanks. Rachel Falzon. Okay. Thanks for coming though. Andrew, another MICA. Andrew, I don't know, Green? Great. Okay. Ella Ritz. All right. If you have second thoughts, let us know. Bob Glock, on behalf of the Hotel Brexton. Bob? Okay. Next is Adriana Foster.
I was mostly here to listen, but since I have the opportunity, I'm a part of the Baltimore Housing Roundtable, and just wanted to advocate for community land trust as a model of permanently affordable housing and community-driven development that creates democratic participatory structures within communities that are accountable to them. You know, we have a campaign that we're pushing for right now to get public investment because, like was previously said, a lot of times one of the largest barriers is capital. And so would just say that, you know, this is a tool that can be used in a lot of different ways for community members to meet needs the way that they see fit. And would just say that I think it's important to continually consider affordability as a critical part of this, and that's one of the reasons why we're pushing for this tool to be used to create jobs, to address affordability issues in the city, and to put community members in the position to make decisions about what's happening to them and their neighbors. And so just wanted to put that out.
Wait, can you wait? Hold on. I've been sort of low-key stalking you guys. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I want to, one, make sure that someone from your group maybe can come to some of the housing artist need committees, if possible. I mean, any of the committees, but I'd really like to hear from you guys. And also, can you talk a little bit about that tool? Is this the 2020?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because we've brought it up and I just don't understand it completely, so I want to know more.
Sure. You mean about the campaign or?
Yeah.
Okay. So the 2020 Vision campaign came out of the Baltimore Housing Roundtable, which is just a space for community residents and advocates and people across different sectors to come together to think about how do we address the housing and development crisis in Baltimore. And so United Workers, I'm a leadership organizer with United Workers. We're a human rights organization. And so the roundtable was looking at what are tools and models that we could use that address needs and that are driven by human rights principles. And so looking at how do we have structures that are accountable, that are participatory, that are universal, that are looking at how do you address needs of people who are, in difficult situations, and recognizing that that's a lot of people in Baltimore. A third of people, renters and a bunch of homeowners, are experiencing housing crisis all the time. And so the 2020 Vision campaign is calling for public investment in community land trust as a tool for community-driven development and permanently affordable housing. And so a part of it is the actual rehab and deconstruction of vacant property, as we know that that's a huge issue in the city, and creating jobs through that process that would prioritize Baltimore City residents and prioritize jobs that would pay a living wage, knowing that wages are a part of the problem, and then advocating for community land trusts as a way of creating a structure that would be a good use of subsidy and would be able to have community members meeting needs where they are in the way that they see fit. and having a structure where, you know, people are able to create permanently affordable housing, and through rental or homeownership or stewarding green space, urban agriculture, just having a process for people to use land as a public good. And that's kind of the broad strokes of what the 2020 Vision Campaign is.
Are you partnering with groups like Second Chance? 'Cause they're in the deconstruction.
We have talked to some groups that do deconstruction, not Second Chance, but a few other ones, and are open and willing to talk to anyone who is interested in that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Next on the list is Megan Capel, also a MICA affiliate. Michael Benevento, or is that an N? Mike, there he is. Is it Benevento?
Yeah.
Okay.
I came primarily to listen. I didn't prepare anything. But I'm part of Current Space, and we're working on a project, and we're expanding into the building, or working on expanding into the building next door. And so I was interested in people's feedback on art spaces and housing. We've been in art space for about 11 or 12 years. So.
I'm sorry, where is the space now?
We're on Howard Street by Franklin.
Any questions for Michael?
Not necessarily now, I don't want to put you on the spot, so you're not planning to talk, but as someone who has occupied the space for a while, and who's working on transitioning into a larger space, I think the task force would benefit from some of the lessons you've learned, specifically with dealing with some of the city agencies. Hopefully it's been a positive experience, but I assume that there have been some areas that where the city can do better, dealing with arts organizations. So, we'd love to hear that sort of feedback.
As far as the past, I guess, year and a half has been like a big learning curve and figuring out that process. I guess prior to that, easing the possibility for public assembly and event space, large capacity things, that could be easier. Securing permits has a lot of lead time, and it can be difficult to navigate.
Yeah. Thanks.
I don't know whether, Amy, your committee or others have connected with Michael and that space. I want to make sure, if you have, if they're looking at each other like you have, but I just want to make sure that we get the full benefit. Anytime someone has practical on-the-ground experience with a particular space and has, the more specific the issues, the better. We're really trying to identify issues that are both unique to spaces and issues that repeat themselves, because some of the spaces are familiar. Obviously, the applicable codes, laws are similar or identical. So whatever we can learn from your particular experience, we're very anxious to do that. If you're already connected, then terrific, but we want to make sure that you are. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next on the list is Rick Royer of Lamondo. Rick.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yes, I'm also on Howard Street, right across the street from Michael. We're renovating 3 buildings on Howard Street as Lamondo, opening some point late spring, early summer. And I also have a space on Park Avenue as well, and studio in the Bromo Arts District. I also did not realize that signing up meant speaking, so The only thing I could think of, because I haven't been to all these meetings, and I don't know if it has been addressed at this point, is that I'm curious as to what happens after the point of delivering this recommendation to the mayor. What is the point between then and the execution? Because a lot of the most miserable attempts at creating things that artists want are created by developers who are making things for artists, assuming they understand what they want, even through processes of having them weigh in at some other point. So I would hope for a continued process that goes all the way through execution, not assuming that at some point artists don't know what they're doing past telling other folks what they need. I'm also very interested in arts ownership. The Lamondo owns its property and is an advocate for that. If arts ownership is not the direction this goes in, I'd be very, again, curious to know or hopeful that the artists continue to weigh in, are not treated just as amenities for other developments around, and are not left out of the gains of other stakeholders that would at some point put their long-term sustainability in this, all of what we've worked for, that eventually becomes precarious again at some other point down the road. So thanks for letting me speak here.
I don't know if you want to comment. Those are very powerful points, and I don't think anybody up here would disagree at all. I think we are responsible to the mayor. The mayor will have to decide what comes next, but I'll bet that most of us up here assume that we're going to remain involved as necessary to keep this going. We're not just going to deliver a report, and I hope there will be a sort of robust implementation plan, and I can't imagine it would not continue to include artists, because it would be foolish not to do so. So thank you very much. I think we all agree. Frank?
Nothing to add other than the fact that if we've got a successful model that's out there and it's something, again, that can be replicated around the city, we should go ahead and try to do that. And if you're having success there on Howard Street, it's something that maybe we need to put in other parts of the city as well, so that we do create exactly what artists need and what they desire in terms of these spaces.
Can I also just sort of dispel the myth that this is at least for our part, a top-down process, that particularly the Artist Need group, I don't know why it's called that, but the group that we're working with is comprised of very vocal artists and artist spaces that are operating in a sort of democratized, self-determined kind of, structure. And so we are, while the task force was formed, in a way that it was formed, what we're trying to do in some ways is deconstruct that and really talk about how we can just amplify what's already existing. So if you look at the survey, which I think would be great if people can spend time critiquing that today, look at the survey that we're trying to create based on what we understand to be a reflection of that process. That would be great. And also I would invite groups like Lamondo to be really transparent and help in sort of this continuation. It's not just a continuation of this task force isn't a specific marker. We're talking about work that's been done, that's being done, that will always be done, centuries in terms of trying to figure out how to make intentional community work. And so one of the things that's really come up quite a bit is that artist groups that aren't as lucky as you guys have been, who really would love to learn from that process and those methodologies to be able to have formal and informal conversations and toolkits. So we would say that part of the onus, and I wouldn't put that much stock in task force, frankly, I think the onus is on us as a continuing body of community artists and people who are making worlds and spaces to try to figure out how to democratize that information, how to share that power, how to share that information on an ongoing basis. The task force and the people on it are one small cog in it. But, I would love to figure out how to engage with groups that are making models that have success and failure that we can learn about in real time, with other artists. So I don't know if that was cogent. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's not just you alone. Yeah, no, I get that. I've been in your position and, other, like it's something that has to happen in real time. So I think you can't do that alone and make it. We're building, making it, sharing it all at the same time. But this is the work. And if we really want to be a model, then we really have to figure out what that transparency looks like here, as well as, for the folks who are really doing it and should rightfully, as you point out, be the people that are determining what it would look like.
Yeah, and just to tie a little bit into that, yeah, we're not, my feeling is that we're not creating developer models for people, like for the city to put into place, in my opinion. I think what we're ultimately tasked with is to provide a series of resources that make the things that artists are doing already safer, and making sure that what the spaces that artists and creatives are creating are best practices of what the of what the are, oh, I'm all nervous now. But basically, what these intentional communities that we're all creating, and the spaces and the platforms for activities and performance spaces and all these things become the most productive and safest versions of what we're already doing, and what you're already doing, and what I'm already doing, and what any of us is ultimately going to be doing. We're not. I don't think. I don't wish for a developer to decide what my idea of a creative space should be.
I just want to reiterate that part of the reason the Artist Needs group produced the survey is so that we can hear from artists directly. So our goal is, again, that artists know, I'm an artist, Stuart, Dan, that artists know what they need. And in many ways, artists are already solving those problems for themselves. And is there a safer way to do that? And is there a way for folks who have figured out, I don't want to use the word successful, but figured out ways that work for them to, again, share those resources. So I just want to encourage the artists here and the artists not here, if you could share with your friends to fill out the survey, because that's how we will get that information. And I think one of the things that we've talked about, at least in our work group, is the possibility of creating some type of resource guide. So, while I think financial support is necessary and important, what Rick has done with Lamondo, navigating the city and the resources that the city offers, and the same with Current Space. So I think there's lessons that we all can learn, and we would love to hear from you, and in terms of what was easy, how did you figure it out, what did you need more help with, so that there's some hub where this information can exist.
While we're passing the mic down the table, one thing that Rick brought up in the beginning was the time frame from when we deliver our recommendations to the mayor, and I think that's because a lot of the arts community there's an urgency around this. I think it's important to remember that we started this task force in the wake of the Bell Foundry getting evicted and the displacement of many, many people. And I just have to bring up that I'm worried about the task force having art spaces to protect by the time we submit this. And I'm not critiquing the speed at which the task force is moving, but I feel like we have to adopt something similar to what Oakland did, which was create mayor's executive action on creating some sort of grace period for existing spaces. Spaces are getting inspected by the fire department at a regular basis, and I understand that's the job of the fire department, but I also feel like spaces are being targeted for being art spaces, and I feel like we have to do something, as a task force suggests to the mayor immediately, that there be some sort of moratorium on these inspections and that people have a grace period of reasonable time to update these spaces. I think without that, by the time mid-year rolls around, we're going to be looking at many, many, many problems that have caused this task force to exist, and we will not have anything to do with our massive pile of solutions.
Just to follow up on that, I think one of the ways that the public can help us, and one of the ways that I'm definitely going to try and present this information to other people is to city council members. Now we have fighting District 3rd, Councilmember Dorsey here. The task force only has certain political levers that are available to us, and the more that we present issues like Dan just brought up, that we need some type of moratorium on what's happening in terms of potentially kicking out or driving even further underground certain creative communities and spaces is something that we're going to have to look at our community organizing piece to rally around our local politicians in order to help us push that through. Because we've been at it for a couple months now, but I do think that that's something that has become more exigent just in the past month. So thanks for bringing that up.
I just want to add, it's very hard for people to think that they can reach out and ask for help when they're afraid that the hand that's going to help them is going to pull them out of their space and they're going to be displaced. So I feel like we have to, I don't know how many.
That's going to hurt the community organizing part of it.
What's that?
That would hurt the community organizing part of it. The fact that there's already a distrust between the community citizens and those agencies that they feel like they're targeting, and they look at even the task force as an extension of that same bureaucracy. So in order for there to be a true partnership between the community has to feel like it has a stake in that, in the entirety of the process, not just a small window, even like what's going on right now. Like there are a lot of things that the community would do if it felt like it was part of it.
I agree.
I've been asked by we're recording this for TV 25, and so I've been asked for people to try and use the microphone wherever possible, when either here or in the audience. You should feel free to come up, or I don't know if it's long enough that someone could walk it out. Is that as far as it goes? Okay. Well, let's just try and cooperate with that so it's recorded. Chief, and I'm going to yes, the microphone.
Good afternoon. I'm your friendly fire department. Believe it or not, we are very friendly. I want to assure everyone here that there is no list of artist spaces. We don't track buildings by that type of classification. So if someone to come here now and even offer me $1 million, I could not give you a list of artist spaces because we don't categorize buildings in that way. We categorize them by occupancy. So there is no direct effort on the part of the fire department, I can assure you, to go out and look for artist spaces. So I just wanted to assure everyone of that because we've gotten several questions about artist spaces, and they kind of don't exist in our classification. It's based on the occupancy. Are you residential? Are you a business? Are you an assembly? That's how we track them. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that that was clear to everything. There's no special effort.
Do you mind if I ask a question on that point? I've just heard from several people that are in these spaces that hear that the fire department has been trying to access their space for weeks and they haven't heard from anyone there, and that they're known as an art space by the fire department. And I'm just wondering how that information could be disseminated or what's causing these inspections.
Inspections for us are triggered either by you're required to have an annual inspection based on the type of business that you are, type of structure that you are. We will come out if we receive a complaint, but normally we don't go up and down trying to conduct inspections on places for no reason. Actually, there are too many buildings for us to do that to, so there's no effort.
Oh, of course, I don't think that.
We don't do that. We have far more to do. When we receive a complaint, it may be there's a lot of cars parked on the outside. There's a lot of garbage on the outside. We see people coming and going. We see extra wires coming out of a house showing us that there's no electricity. Those are the kinds of things that we respond to. We don't respond to, this is an artist building and there are people here. Because even if there were artists working there, we don't know that that's not a structure that you're not permitted to live, work, and play in. So that's not how we respond. So I don't know where you've gotten that.
Just to be clear, I don't think the fire department has like a dartboard with the word artists on it or anything like that.
Okay.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that these spaces do exist, and however they're getting reported by either by a 311 or someone who's concerned or just wants to see the space shut down for political reasons. I do think we need to establish immediately, not within the span of several months, what to do if a space is in violation, and to not have further, with lack of a better term, bell foundries. I moved to this city because of the vibrant arts community, and I made my living doing so and started a small business because of it. And I think if these spaces continue happening, if what's happening with these spaces continues, I feel like our work is pointless.
We have procedures in place in the event that we come upon a place where people are living or working and they should not be, for various fire code related reasons, that we're able to assist them in relocating wherever possible. So it's not just artists that we may find in buildings where it's not safe. We have fires probably every other week where it's perceived to probably be a vacant building when we get there, and there may be homeless people that are living in that building. So it's not just one population, and we treat all of those people the same way. If you're in need of a relocation effort, we will call out the Office of Emergency Management if you indicate that you're in need of relocation and assist you. So it's not targeted in any way.
Again, I don't think you're targeting them. I'm just talking about spaces that are getting inspected and being told to move. And the creation of this task force was to preserve artist-run spaces. I think we should follow what Oakland did and have the mayor create something of protocol for what to do with existing spaces that exist now. Without that, we're going to be in the same situation where people are going to get displaced. And if you get kicked out of your artist-run space, it's not going to reform. It's just not going to happen.
Let me just comment for a minute on that. Obviously, I think we all recognize the fire department has probably a sworn and legal duty to deal with life safety issues. And where they exist, they have to be addressed. At the same time, Dan, I absolutely agree with you. I think everybody wants to make sure that we don't want to do this and find out in the worst case scenario that in the meantime, all these spaces have atrophied or worse, been put out of business. So we have to find a way to do that. I'm familiar with the Oakland executive order. We've actually started a conversation with the commissioner and with the mayor's office about what could be done here analogous to that, because I think I share your view, which is we need to do something right now. This is about short-term, medium-term, long-term, and the short-term issue is preserving the spaces that are here to the extent possible, giving as much, whether you want to call it flexibility or amnesty or grace period. I think you say grace period. I think in the past I've said amnesty. Something that allows us for these spaces to continue and to exist and thrive while we figure this out, with some sort of backstop about life safety issues that at some point everybody has to acknowledge. But short of that, we should be as flexible as we possibly can. And we're going to work with the housing department, with the fire department, with the mayor's office, and with others along that path. So I appreciate your comments, and I think it's important for everybody to hear that today.
I just want to kind of detail what the fire department has said. I have most of probably all the artists' buildings in the 12th district, and I can assure you, we haven't got no calls about go check that building, that's our art space, and we haven't got anything. So I want to assure that the artists that that's not happening in my office, and I don't get calls at all. So
I know of several spaces in District 12 that are scheduled to get inspected shortly.
well, we haven't got no calls about it.
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Again, we are, I mean, look, we are trying to make some policy recommendations, short, medium, long term, and in the short term, we're also trying to get ahead of and top of these problems. So to the extent that there are specific examples, you should be coming to us. We're here to try and solve these problems, to create to deal with this short-term issue, as well as the medium and long-term issues. So we need as much information as possible. And I think there are enough advocates who will try and strike a balance between the very important priority of allowing these spaces to continue, balanced against, again, I think in some, but certainly not all instances, for sure, significant life safety issues that people do have to take seriously. So we can talk about it further, reach out, but I really appreciate you raising it. It is a critically important issue, one that we've literally been talking about today. The Oakland executive order provides potentially some kind of a framework that we could try and adapt. Frank?
Just one thing, I just wanted to acknowledge the person who keeps coming up to the desk here, that's Andrew Aylshire. He is in the mayor's office, and he's been invaluable in terms of getting this task force going and providing resources that we need, so we need to acknowledge Andrew as well. So.
All complaints go to Andrew.
That's right.
Andrew will get, Andrew will get the email that is on the website, I forget what it's, I think it's info at or task force, whatever it may be on the website goes actually to Andrew directly. So if you need to communicate, that is certainly one way to do it. Okay, we're going to continue down the list. We still have people who are signed up, so this is terrific. We really appreciate the discussion. The next person is, let's see, Kirk Shannon from, is it Flickeria? Okay. And then David, I can't, is that Mitchell?
I actually want to say something real quick.
Yeah, please come up.
We have here in Baltimore national treasures in the way of Arena Players Theater and in the way of the Blacks in Wax. And both of those entities exist in blighted communities. And, you know, while it would be great to get a bucket of money for either one of those institutions, I think during the time I've served as a board member for these Arena Players, I've been on the phone with 311 several times trying to get the sidewalk fixed, you know? So, I mean, I understand the nature of this task force and that it's new, and I understand the issues that everybody's bringing to the table right now, which make this problem of space and safe space seem like a new problem because there are a lot of new people that are coming to the microphone right now. But, you know, in the case of these institutions that I bring up, like Arena Players, they've been around 63 years, and they've been dealing with these issues for 63 years. And I would ask that the task force act as an advocate for institutions like this in a way that would just help them with the surrounding areas environmentally. You know, that would be a great blessing to either one of those institutions. That's it. That's really just what I wanted to mention them and say that it's not all about getting the big bucket of money, although that would be nice.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Yes, Jean?
David, thank you. In the course of our particular work group meetings, we have specifically discussed Arena Players and also specifically discussed UB Blake. I'm sure there are other places that might not be on folks' radar, so those are a part of our consideration of spaces that exist that should be supported, and we should be thinking about them within the context of the whole fabric of the arts community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the list is Graham, is it Cotiel Allen? Did I get that right?
Carell Allen.
Oh, Carell, I'm very sorry.
No, that's all right.
Thanks, everyone, for hosting. My name is Graham Corral Allen. I know many of you. I'm a public artist and an organizer with Citizen Artists Baltimore. I do lots of projects around town. In terms of safe artist spaces, I just wanted to reiterate some of the points that were brought up earlier and to emphasize the importance of ownership and the precedents that are being set right now here in the city. So, firstly, in terms of affordable housing and a sustainable solution in community control, Baltimore Housing Roundtable's 2020 vision is a really helpful and extremely well-researched model that they are pushing. I personally support, and I think could certainly facilitate ways of getting spaces into the hands of ownership for cultural communities, which would be really helpful in terms of long-term sustainability. One of the reasons why us artists end up in these at times dangerous spaces is because of a lack of access to capital. And most of us are just working income folks like most of Baltimore, and we don't have the type of financial records necessary for getting a loan to buy a building. So, in terms of long-term solutions and creating a network of safe artist spaces, as articulated by some of the paperwork I've read, thinking of alternative models for financing that would enable artist-led development projects is something that the city could really, I think, facilitate and help out in a big way. The city is the largest landowner in the city. And to circle back around to Michael Benevento's in the stories around Current and Lamondo, those are artist-led development projects. Current in particular is a unicorn. In that it was started off as, from what I understand, as a temporary storefront space enabled by a downtown activation program. Eventually they were offered another space when that block that they were in was repackaged for a large-scale development that didn't happen. So they moved out of their first space, and then there's other space. They've renovated this space that was, up until recently, owned by the city. It was a relatively livable space that they could get into, and they put a lot of sweat equity into it. They didn't have the capital to, at that point, from what I understand, to have bought that building necessarily, but now they own it thanks to what was a truly progressive acceptance by the BDC of their proposal in response to the RFP that was put out for Howard Street, that 400 block of Howard Street. So unlike all the other people who are responding to that RFP, they were not like an old school developer with a ton of money. They said, we are artists. We have a track record of being able to renovate buildings, sweat equity. We can do this. And miraculously, the city has accepted that. That's really cool. Good job, city. Let's keep on doing that, and let's do that for places all over the city, because they're not the only ones. There are tons of other artistic and cultural groups that have been doing work for decades that have great, social responsibility established, that type of social capital, and certainly the skills to fix up a building. Why can't the city continue to redistribute some of what they already own to these upstanding members of the community? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Moving to the list, Jeffrey Richardson.
Yes, I'm here representing the Baltimore Improv Group. Currently, we used to be on Charles Street, on North Charles Street, 1823 North Charles Street. Most recently, we moved to the Single Carrot Theater. We're in a space there called the Barn there, and we're looking for a performance space. I was just called last night to show up to the meeting, so I was just here to share that with you.
Since you're here and you have a very specific question, just expand a little bit on that. What's your sort of sense of the gap? You've tried, you've looked, you haven't been able to find, you think the reason might be because it doesn't exist, it's too expensive. I'd love to hear your perspective on sort of what the problem that you're facing.
I guess we were in the Mercury Theater, and I guess it was a poor space, and we were looking for a better space, a better performance space. Currently there, we had about space for like maybe 40 people in the audience to see our performances. And it was a kind of a dilapidated space, so we partnered with Single Carrot Theater for a better space, but currently we are in the lobby. In the lobby, it's a barn area, and we have to be quiet when they're having performances, and it's a kind of a makeshift agreement there. So that's kind of the issue there. We've been in Baltimore, I think, for 12 years now. And mostly, before we got the Mercury space, we moved to Single Carrot Theater in the fall.
Right. Well, yeah, my daughter's actually taken some improv group classes, so I'm familiar with your facility, when you were on Charles with Single Carrot by the Charles Theater.
Yeah, that was the Mercury Theater.
Right. Oh, is that the Mercury?
Yeah, that was the Mercury, currently at Single Carrot Theater.
Got it.
Sharing the space there.
So I think if you were here, hopefully you've heard about the survey that we have, kind of both paper versions and online versions.
Yeah.
We really need to know from groups like yours who are, an established group, making a great contribution, has a significant space need. That's a very, very specific kind of problem that we'd like to be able to engage with you in. Not only in the survey, but maybe even then to sit down with you. You can talk with our folks who are looking specifically at space needs, because that's a really concrete example of a group that needs space, that has specific space issues that we can try and work together to solve.
Okay, that'd be great. Currently, we've moved to trying to have shows 7 nights a week. So we've expanded that. Used to be just weekends, Thursday and Friday. So we're trying to make a 7-day a week presence in the community.
So Jeannie, can you connect with?
Yes, yes, and we had talked about Space Finder Baltimore, which
Yes.
is an online tool, but also in about 4 weeks, we're going to have one of our partners from Partners for Sacred Places come down, who does an Art in Sacred Places program that we're implementing in Baltimore. And it might be of interest to you. I'll give you my card. You can call me and I'll let you know if you'd like to come and talk to her. We already have like 6 historically sacred places that have been fully inventoried for use. So it might be that we could accelerate some of that.
All right, thank you very much.
Once again, everybody familiar with the website that's out there? It's safeartspace@baltimorecity.gov.
Hi, I'm going to take a second turn because I think it's worth it, because I just remembered AS220 is a fantastic model for everyone to look at if you haven't looked at it already. AS220 is an art space in Providence, Rhode Island. Started in 1984 above a legal loft above a bar, has grown up to this point to basically be the downtown arts district in Baltimore. It owns 3 blocks of downtown. And Bert Krenke, the artistic director, the founder of AS220, is actually going to be here. Lamondo's bringing him here to Baltimore March 16th. He'll be doing a public talk, discussion at Lamondo on March 16th. So I think everyone should try and make it to that. Free, it's free. Free advice.
John.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want a second shot at the microphone? Fred?
Yeah. I wanted to really follow up on sort of 3 separate speakers, because I think that the survey is much more focused on individual artists as it's structured. And we've got a number of kind of collective efforts that are going on, whether they're a performance group like the improv group or the Lamondo's efforts or current space. And I wonder if, rather than being so passive, we should try to figure out a way that we could actually use these as kind of mini case statements for ourselves and really put a group together that could interview individuals, really talk to them about what they've experienced, where their challenges are, where they've been able to be successful, where they haven't been, and see what we can learn from that experience. It seems to me we've got people coming to the table. There might be others that we could start going to as well, that we could start looking at, because I think that it sounds like everything we're doing is saying, come to us, give us the information. It seems to me we should be reaching out and to send a few people to start writing that stuff up.
It's a great idea, Fred. Before we continue, there's a car outside parked in a bus lane that needs to move ASAP. So if anybody remembered parking in a bus lane, you're about to be towed.
Do we know what kind of car?
Yeah, what kind of car, Andrew, did they say?
Color car?
No. Thanks, Andrew.
I would also just want to emphasize on the survey, to Fred's point, you'd have to self-select to let us know who you are, because we're intentionally keeping it anonymous to avoid the issues that Dan was pointing out. So if you are a group that wants to be engaged in that way, you'd have to let us know. And I'm not sure if the survey is built in a way that could where people can select to not be anonymous or not?
No, but there is a comment section. So I think there's actually 2 comment sections. So there's plenty of room to add notes or to let us know you'd like to connect with us. And please do.
Next is Press Adams Impact Hub. Yes? Hello? Okay, all right. And then it looks like it might be Ian Power, although we just have the email address. Is that? That's fine. So you're good? Yeah. Okay. And then is it Dewan Patterson from Beemore Group? Sir?
Good afternoon. My name is Dewan Patterson, and I'm an artist first and also a community organizer, as well as an advocate. As I voice some concerns as well as problems and solutions, I'd like to first bring up a solution that I did to address something that's really prevalent inside Baltimore. The fragmentation of the communities across Baltimore, the segregation in Baltimore. And Baltimore's art scene is reflective of Baltimore as a whole. Fragmented and segregated. There are displaced artists that have been displaced for years. Some have been decades. But I rarely ever hear any solution to address those displaced artists. We're talking about sustaining some art buildings and districts that's been existing already. But we're rarely ever talking about those displaced artists of color here in Baltimore. And I asked that question, 1, what are we doing to assist those who've been displaced for years? Will they be seen as residents that needs an art home as well? How many art districts and buildings that's not coded will be built and maintained around institutions or neighborhoods that are proven successful, quote unquote? And I would like to know who's defining proven success and what is an established group. Well, we have so many artists that have been displaced for so long, lacking the resources, the proper representation, they rarely ever get into the position where they can advocate for themselves at this stage. One of the concerns why many displaced artists of color don't participate at this level is something that we know, institutional mistrust that's happening, as well as ownership, which was previously mentioned. And one of the most important things that I always kind of hear within the community is intellectual property theft that happens for displaced artists that do not have the resources, institutional support, or the legal fees to combat sometimes when intellectual theft happens. There's another concern that I have that many other displaced artists have. When we talk about art spaces, when they're afforded, when the developers are afforded the affordable housing tax credit, they're able to subsidize living arrangements for artists. But we rarely ever think about how can someone discriminate against these artists? And who's defining if you are a true artist or not? And what standard? Are we considering them as established groups and someone else dictates their art portfolio, and then we can discriminate against them and say this is not real art? And then we discriminate against them on housing? So when you're talking about housing, we also need you to think about how are we defining who's qualified to get that affordable housing tax credit. Then a solution. How about we begin to build more art buildings and districts that help to sustain some of Baltimore underserved communities? If we look at Station North, we have a few anchor institutions inside that area, and they're providing sustainable communities that's walkable for those people residing inside that community. Imagine if we was to develop another art district or building that helps to sustain a community where they will provide housing, community programming, jobs, and if we provide jobs, economical opportunity, community program that's reflective of the community needs, we'll eventually reduce some crime as well. And that will help to increase ownership and the tax base. So that's one of the solutions that I see is like providing a mixed-use development inside of a neighborhood to help stabilize that community. And then that's where we can see some legislation being passed and supported that will help fund, secure, and build wealth in some of the underserved communities across Baltimore that really represent some of the displaced artists of color. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person who signed up is Kellyanne Richmond.
Hello, everyone. I hope it might be all right if I read something. I didn't want to deviate too far from the points I was trying to make, so.
Of course.
My name is Kellyanne Richmond. I've been an artist probably since I was born. Evidence of this is a picture of my sister and I. She was 4 and I was 5, and I'm holding an ice cream handprint. It's a life I either chose or have no choice other than to be what I am. Just because it may be liberating to dictate your own day, it is still anything but easy. In Baltimore, it is a struggle. It means economic hardship, burden. It means low wages. It means being a social outcast to the professional world. It means being not only dismissed by our government, but sometimes attacked by it. And yes, we definitely seem to make a fun target for Baltimore City Police. I support Black Lives Matter. They are right. Police are abusing minority groups, and that's only half of it, which also include artists among a number of other groups. Long story short, I was once dragged by 4 police officers by my hair, detained for no reason, handcuffed so tightly my wrists swelled up red and bruised, twice the size. I was searched, and nothing was found on me that was illegal, which they were sure they would find. When they realized they could not arrest me, they had me instead paddy-wagoned, and by the way, there didn't appear to be any seatbelts in there, and I certainly wasn't snapped into one. It's always a rough ride when you're not wearing a seatbelt and your hands are behind your back. In fact, it's a balancing act, and the only reason my face didn't slam against one of the side walls was because of the years of ballet. My 2-step footwork seemed to work to my advantage. And I was like, no wonder people call them rough rides. So yes, I believe the Baltimore City Police Force needs to undergo some very serious scrutiny by our leaders. Which leads me to my festival. I do events and festivals in the city. I routinely go down to the permit office and have to get permits. So I've engaged with the government on this level. My festival had been going on for 26 years. I inherited it about 9 years ago, ran it myself for 8, and last year I couldn't have it. The last mayor's regime, anyway, put a stop to it after it had been going on at Port Covington for 26 years in a public park that was strangely sold to Under Armour. I didn't realize we could sell public parks, but that is another matter. My point is I decided to basically legally, in written form, politely decline the police officers of last minute 4 days before my event was supposed to take place, when I filled out all the permits and did all that stuff. They offered for me to sign a contract for $10,000 for police to be at my festival. I'd like to include that based on Baltimore City Park's own rules, I decided to go with choice B, hire private security, which is more expensive because more people are required under Baltimore City Public Works law. You aren't utilizing police if you aren't utilizing police. I had already contracted private security in the numbers required and had already placed a deposit, and they knew this, the city knew this, because I had already submitted this documentation to the city, and police still decided they could make up their own rules or didn't know them and decided to impose on me just 4 days before the event that I would need to sign a contract stating that I would pay $10,000 to them, which is an amount double of what the legally required amount of police officers would need to be if you had no private security at all, which, like I already mentioned, I said I did. That to me is called extortion and or proposing a bribe. So I basically declined, I did decline, but I decided that my free of charge volunteer music and arts event, where I let artists set up tables for free and sell their art, and where we give the humble amount of beer money we make to charity, was not going to be able to pay the $20,000 more the city wanted this year in a different park between what police, EMS, and the fire were demanding collectively, and didn't have my festival this last year. I hosted this festival as a free community offering to help artists and musicians. I did it to raise money for charity, not for police. And I'm not alone. In this past few years, many artists and musicians, homegrown thrown festivals are being attacked and shut down. My festival was shut down with helicopters one year simply because both Parks and Recs and the Liquor Board failed to notify the necessary parties that more people were coming to my event than I originally expected. I called both departments. From that point on, I have been sort of blacklisted by the city. All sorts of things have been assumed about me. It hurt my character to make it look like I did something wrong when it's really just different departments not communicating properly, or at all in some cases.
Ms. Richmond, can I ask you to, I don't want to interrupt you.
I do want to get to artist displacement because it's a law that, and I'll just skip to that then. I have been displaced for 17 years now. I'm going to be 39 soon. I'm not a homeowner. I know most people are talking about the warehouse situation, and I support everything everyone is saying on that. But, you know, the first right of refusal protects single-family homes. There's nothing covering multi-unit dwellings. Now, if you want to look at DC law, that would be a great reference. This would never happen in DC. What just happened to me was I finally, after all these years, can be financed for a home. My landlord told me when I was moving in, signing the lease, that he would promise it to me first, which he didn't end up doing. Went to auction, even though I put in a contract in. It took me all these things I had to do to get financed, and it was sold out from under me, even though I put in a contract at auction for $9,000 less than I offered, because there's no law protecting first right of refusal when you're in a multi-unit situation. Had there been, I would be able to not only be making money off of my life, me living there, but I would have been able to go to grad school. I mean, it would have enabled me to be able to do a lot of things I now can't do. So life will continue to be a struggle.
Could I hate to interrupt you, but could I ask you, especially if you've taken the time, especially if you've taken the time to write this, if you could give us some version of this in writing, especially since you have some very specific recommendations, that would be very helpful. We're trying to have a little bit of a time limit.
I understand.
So, but we're very interested. And may I also ask you the name of your festival, or how you refer to it?
It's called Powwow Festival.
Powwow?
Powwow, yes.
So if you can, I don't want to cut you off completely. If you want to conclude, that's fine. But anything you can give us in writing, either through the survey or otherwise,
I could send this to you. I mean, I think there's a lot more I could say. I could talk to you all day long. And I have a lot of ideas. I was thinking, though, that artists need to be able to buy their own houses. You know, if I buy one now, I'll own it when I'm 70. You know? We can't work forever like that. Rents are going to increase, but our wages won't. So there are so many sections of the city where it's blocks and blocks of empty houses. I'm sure, if people have said this before, I can just let someone else speak. But there are a number of things that I think could change And, artists, they move into a so-so area, get displaced. Why not keep them there and allow them some way to purchase the property, at a lower rate? And then they beautify the area and invite people to feel comfortable moving in there. So, anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for taking all that time, but we really would like to see what you have. So if you want to leave that, if you want to rewrite it and email it, we'd be happy to have it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have a card I should email it to?
Just see Andrew, and there's an email address, I think, on the materials in the back.
Thank you.
But just, he can confirm it for you. Thanks. I don't think I've missed anybody on the sign-in sheets, but I'll suspect there might be some people here who would like to speak still, and that would be fine.
Hi, how are you? I have nothing to say or
Can you give us your name? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would rather not give my name. Can I have is it possible y'all can let this go flat? But can I get a narrative as to what in fact occurred at Load of Fun Gallery in terms of the weaponization of calling in violations? Because this happened prior to the Bell Foundry situation, but did close really quickly. And it seemed as if it was a fire violation. I know that there are people here privy to that story. If in fact it doesn't make sense, or if I'm totally out of line for asking about the situation in regards to Load of Fun, which is now currently the Motor House, I would love that. Once again, if no one has an answer, I perfectly understand. Thank you.
I certainly don't have any information about that. I don't know. Do you? Okay. Well, why don't we defer it? And when Michael comes back, we can re-ask the question. Okay? Sure. Okay, anybody else? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, Councilman, did you? Which? Don't make me choose.
Hey, everybody. I'm here kind of as a citizen. I like to defer to my colleague, Councilman Stokes here, who is a member of this task force. But it's something that, I started hosting shows in my parents' basement when I was 14 years old. I've been, in some capacity, part of our arts community in Baltimore for many of the years prior to me becoming a member of the City Council. And just a couple of things that have occurred to me. One, I was at the Bell Foundry during the period that tenants or residents were being allowed to remove their things. And one of the things that I heard from people there in that moment were kind of the seeming lack of humanitarian concern in there, and I'm sure that that's a large part of why this task force exists. But two things in particular that seemed worth pointing out were that the folks there didn't have any idea what the Office of Emergency Management is, or who Reggie Scriber is, and what the Ombudsman does, and that it's there for the purpose that I heard stated here, partly to assist in relocation efforts. And as the Director Braverman pointed out, they are supposed to be called, as soon as something like this is going to occur, and they were not called until the next day while this was happening. They didn't know that people had been displaced that night. And in the meantime, folks kind of panicked about, giving their information, not sure if they should claim that they lived in this space or not. So there's a lot of just kind of a lack of information. And so I would just take this as a cue for the city to try to do a little better effort in just educating the public on what city services are offered, what these offices do. Another thing that has occurred to me is that one of the things that was problematic in the Bell Foundry was the quality and the existence of unpermitted work. I have, throughout the last couple of years, and also having worked as a contractor and having to pull permits for the city, found it a rather arduous process pulling construction permits. I think that as we consider the issue of artist housing in the larger context of like just housing, it's important to realize that artists are facing many of the same problems that we as the city as a whole are facing, and that improvement to general kind of services as a city are de facto kind of improvements to artist conditions. One of the things could be better outreach around the permitting process and improving the permitting process for pulling construction permits. And then another thing that I've encountered personally is occasions where you want to do some work, you know how to do it, but you are not personally licensed to be able to do that work, and it would cost you a whole lot more to hire somebody to do that work that you know that you can perform. This is part of the essence of the challenge of DIY spaces is knowing that you can get it done, but there are these capital barriers to success. I'll just throw this out here. Maybe it's crazy. The city has people on its payroll who are licensed in fields of electrical work and such. Maybe it's possible for there to be a city and DIY partnership in issuing permits and allowing people to perform work under some sort of guidance, or supervision by the city under certain circumstances. And as we're talking about artists, one of the things that there are models that exist for who qualifies. I know that in European places, it's possible to qualify for very high quality, very cheap health insurance if you are able to prove that you earn a certain threshold through arts, cultural production, but below a certain other threshold. If you fit into that median, you're kind of showing, yes, I'm actually a legitimate artist. I've been, working at this, but I'm not making exorbitant amounts of money. We can use certain criteria like that, I think, to qualify for different programs that are geared directly at artists rather than maybe within arts districts. I have a sense that there are a lot of people who feel like arts districts invariably gentrify and displace workers, not workers, artists, and those who make them thriving communities. And I think this might be a good time to discuss alternatives to the model of geographic location of benefits and placing them more in the field of work of making art. The last thing I'll talk about is that we do have not just a lot of city-owned buildings, but we do have a lot of vacant privately owned buildings, and I think there might be the potential for incentivizing of the stabilization of privately owned buildings through something, maybe a program like a tax benefit to private owners, say folks who own hundreds of houses and live in Texas and just trade them for open market value, to stabilize these buildings, not necessarily for the purpose of residence, but for use as artist studio spaces to make doing the work of being an artist more affordable, where they might not otherwise be inhabitable for residents. I don't know if Michael could probably talk about that. As well as, I want to reiterate what I've heard here and what I talk about. I promote Le Mondo to virtually every person that comes into my office in City Hall. I like to point out that, again, this is not a typical kind of development model. The fundraising and the structure for acquisition is a little abnormal, and yet they're persisting and moving closer to actually opening, whereas at the same time that they responded to an RFP, the adjacent buildings, there were models of more traditional development, money in the bank versus, and like investors ready to throw in, and neither of those projects has gone anywhere. So these artist-driven projects are actually from communities and revitalizing communities. And I do just want to second that there very clearly are artist space being targeted and isolated. I have received numerous calls. Like, I don't receive calls from people just ordinarily in my office or on my personal phone like, I'm just Joe Schmo and I live in X neighborhood and I got word that my house is going to be inspected. People are going to come in and check the wiring of my place. Like, that doesn't happen. That is happening at an accelerated rate in the artist space. So I think it really, I want to second Dan's point that a moratorium is paramount right now, because this clearly is happening by whatever means it is. So that's what I'm going to walk away from the mic having said.
Thanks. Well, Council, I just want to say a couple things in response. First of all, thank you for being here, and thanks for your own commitment. You obviously bring a lot of personal credibility and passion to this because of your own background, so we appreciate it. You touched on a few things that hadn't really been discussed so far today, but I think are worth sort of reiterating and repeating. The task force and the work groups have talked about the communication issues that you started talking about at the beginning, about making clear what the rules might be, what the opportunities might be, what the resources might be, and we've talked about ways in which we could make those available in a clear and concise way. We've talked about the resource question regarding, you know, your approach is this apprenticeship idea, which is, you know, for actual work, which is very interesting. We've talked similarly about the idea of having resources, technical resources, architectural design resources available so that people who have spaces that they want to improve and want to do so in a reasonable cost, lawful way can do that. They may not have access. Could this task force recommend that the city make that resource available as a public benefit? So, you know, those kinds of things, which we really have not talked about yet today, are critically important. So we want to continue that discussion, but I want you to know, I want people who are here to know that those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. And some of them are really shouldn't be that hard to achieve. They just don't exist, and they need to. So
I like apprenticeships.
Yes, sir.
Sounds great.
Okay. Excuse me.
Councilman, before you go, I just want you to know, as of Monday, permits are online now. It's got massive improvement in the customer experience, I think. So.
The gentleman over here regarding, you don't need to come up. I just want to tell you, I alerted Mr. Braben, who said he'd be happy to talk with you afterwards, since it's sort of a little bit off the topic, but be happy to give you whatever information you need or want regarding the process behind.
I don't know if it's off the topic, considering, it's just, it seemed like from a paranoia perspective, someone had called a complaint, the space was shut down, and then it moved hands relatively quickly.
Okay.
It's been put to great use, but who knows the story and the narrative? So I was asking simply for any sort of clarification, if anyone has any sort of insight. That's all.
Well, I can tell you, thanks for the concern. There's, you know, every now and then some of the spaces, you know, end up being inspected because somebody who's living there has a beef with somebody else or with the landlord. And pretty sure that's what brought us to Load of Fun. And when we did an inspection at Load of Fun, it was unsafe. And the uses which were not permitted and couldn't be because it was grossly unsafe in terms of a bunch of different things, but minimally the electrical, you may be familiar with seeing that. And so it couldn't be occupied any longer. The owner, however, was cooperative and worked it with his tenants to end the use and to have people exit in a sort of orderly way. And then I think ultimately the building was sold and it's returned to the artist community in a matter of speaking. But that's the history. Thanks.
Do you mind if I touch on that real quick?
Sorry.
No
Where's that
problem.
coming from? Yes, Dan.
I think Guy's main point, and it echoes a point that someone very well articulated earlier, there's a great deal of institutional mistrust, and just when I was trying to promote this particular event on Facebook, many people who shared it said, I don't trust this task force. And I think it's because people just honestly don't know what it is. And I think it's an uphill battle for us. And as someone on the task force and within the arts community, I think it would behoove us to better articulate exactly what we are. I know we're all trying our best, and I see you shaking your head because I know you bear a brunt of it. But I think there's a reason why a great number of spaces aren't here tonight is because they're afraid to come here, and they're afraid to come out and say, I am with this space, because of just narking on themselves. And I feel like it's going to be a big effort on our part, and especially the organizations that want to help, to let people know that they are here to help and in a safe process.
Can we reiterate the fact that you can, the people who feel that way can get on the and do the survey, and get online and share whatever concerns they have around that, so that the idea is not to, again, identify these spaces and to evict people, but the idea is to make and have safe spaces where artists can perform, live, and work. So, again, if they don't want to share their names, go on the survey. We've tried our best to make it anonymous, so that people can share if they have some concerns, or if they got ideas, or if they want to, present an idea, or some way that we can, again, create a space that is safe and usable. We need to know about that.
I think the people who put the survey together did a great job of doing such, and maybe it's an impossible task to try to convince a population that's never going to trust a government board to trust the government. Being someone who doesn't trust the government, I have a hard time trusting myself on this task force. But perhaps it's for the people who did come to this meeting that are not on the task force, to let other people know to come to these meetings and to voice their concerns and to find out if we're narcs or not by coming to these meetings. And I think mistrust is vitally important in a process like this, especially since there's so much confusion about what can get a space shut down, or what can stop a space from being a home or a performance space or a gallery or a studio.
Yeah, I mean, just let me respond by saying one thing about trust, which is, unfortunately, trust is something that takes a long time to build up, and the worst time to try and develop trust is in a crisis. And I would argue that what's happened at Bell Foundry was a crisis for sure, for both the people who are directly affected and for the city larger, and it's created this effort, which is, if not a crisis, certainly a very urgent need to act, and as we've talked about, to act quickly. So we're struggling a little bit because I think it's hard to develop that trust on the fly. So I hope that people who are here will be able to come to the table. We're all going to have to trust each other as much as we can, get as much information as we possibly can, try and make some good recommendations. Hopefully the mayor will see fit to implement them, and then we can all work together to build or rebuild the trust that needs to happen so that this dynamic doesn't persist. But we kind of are where we are, and we will take whatever input or advice people have, not only about substance, but about process and communication and trust building and all of those things, and we'll do the best we can in an imperfect situation. But I'm sensitive to the issues that you're describing and welcome anybody's advice and input. Hopefully eventually we'll be judged by our actions, as people like to say. So, Councilman, apparently you want to speak again, and that would be fine.
Humanitarian kind of outlook, I think, goes a long way in establishing trust. And the one thing that I forgot to mention before was that while I was at the Bell Foundry, while people were being allowed to take their things out, the power was cut off in the building. I had to plead with Thomas Waugh in order to allow for a generator to be placed outside of the building so an extension cord could be taken in, so simple lighting could be provided to the people who were removing their possessions from the second floor of this building that was already deemed dangerous, yet they weren't being allowed light. Just
the bogeyman sort of image there, I'm afraid it just doesn't apply. PG&E cut off the service because it was illegally hot-wired on the second floor and creating a dangerous situation. It wasn't like, we don't want you to have light.
No,
and
I
turned
know,
it off.
but having the foresight, the department can have the foresight to say you're gonna be ejecting people from a second floor of an unsafe building let's make sure that they have light better than headlamps.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it was cut off because once BG&E was aware of the condition, they had no
I'm
choice
aware of
but
the
to immediately
conditions
cut it
too.
off.
You and I
Yeah.
have had this discussion. I'm
we've had
aware of
this
the
one.
conditions.
On the upside, Bros is back in. Their use and occupancy was granted. Bell Foundry is occupied again with a permit for the Rock Opera Society. So,
That's nice.
Can I just sort of pause for a second and ask questions rather than, to your point about what trust. Let me just start with trust, because I've come from a community that has very good reason not to trust anybody in this country at all. And at the end of the day, I caution people in terms of their expectations from anybody who's working in certain confines, government, corporate spaces, code folks, whatever. We all have some very serious limitations, and yet I'm here, right? And I look at Mr. Mabin, who's been at every single meeting to try to work through this. It's gonna require a multiplicity of very creative thinking, and I'm talking really creative, from people who have been in and outside of the system. I'm talking Harriet Tubman level creative, okay? So let's just be really careful about problematizing the problem as opposed to getting to some real multiple sort of ideas around these spaces. So some people have talked about artist-owned spaces. Some people have talked about using agencies and sort of unicorn models that may or may not be replicated in a sort of mass way, because there just can't be, right? There's going to be a lot of limitations as we go forward, and I'm not going to say, sort of trust everything, and I hope that, you'll judge us. I hope you won't judge us. I hope you'll look internally, and I hope that we will be more self-determined and more ground up, less top down, and that we will hopefully teach institutions and task force and people like those of us sitting at the table how this is already being done and how existing work can be supported, as opposed to thinking about words like what's going to be given or created for us. We don't, and now I'm talking in my artist voice, we don't actually need that. What we really need is equity, access, clear, navigatable tools to do what we already do. And I'm not sure what's happening in terms of reporting or people calling or who's snitching on whom or what's happening in those cases. But those things, even in a moratorium scenario, are going to still continue to happen, and there's going to be some irregular ways that they're dealt with, and there's going to be all these problems. So in the interim, what I would like to say is, if people have a specific way to encourage equity and encourage a real multiplicitous understanding of how artist spaces can be supported and in fact even elevated, then please share those. The problems, we get them. We talk about those ad nauseum, but please talk to me more about how we can subvert some of the things that we know are also oppressing these spaces and keeping us from doing really radical work around new artist spaces, and Baltimore becoming a model for those kinds of spaces.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for your time. We came here mostly to listen, but figured we'd take the opportunity to speak as well. My name's Mike Franklin. This is my partner, Caroline. We have a third partner that couldn't be here tonight. We started a small LLC to begin the next space when our former space, which was the R House in Station North, was closed down due to permitting violations and a lot of the issues that were being echoed here tonight. So this happened in August of 2015. We have been since trolling Craigslist, LoopNet, CoStar, everything else that we can find, looking for the next space like this that we're looking to develop. And we're just running into a lot of the same issues that have been spoken about tonight in terms of affordability, in terms of accessibility, in terms of availability, and in terms of access to the resources that would help someone who's trying to start a business figure out where to begin. For instance, we've looked at probably over 30 to 50 spaces for lease, for sale, and the first thing is, what can we do in this space? So we'd go to the zoning board and try to look that up, try to figure out what permits are necessary. We've made some introductions there, that's been helpful, but basically we're approaching this from the stance that we lost our former space because things weren't set up in this correct way. Obviously we want things to be safe, we want things to be law-abiding, and we're looking to establish a permanent space. So we look forward into working with the task force and kind of exploring some of these options that are available for people out there, and hopefully assisting others in similar situations.
I'll give you a little insight into our business plan. We're trying to start a music incubation space, which is largely what the Our House was on North Avenue. And we've, like Mike said, been exploring for about 2 years. I can tell you some very concrete suggestions. One thing is we would like to move into a space, and obviously because it's for musicians, there's going to be a lot of build out involved. Kudos to the BDC for entrusting us with a tiny bit of money to do that when we do finally have a space. Unfortunately, we don't have enough money to purchase a space, so we're looking at leasing. And you can imagine how disappointing it will be when we are not able to own a building that we're putting all this sweat equity into. That affects our ability to be sustainable. If we could own our building and build out in it, it would make a lot more sense from a business perspective. Our survival rate would exponentially rise. Another thing is, since we're looking at leasing, we are very aware that the building needs to be permitted and up to code. However, when we called the fire department to give us a hand, come out and look at this building that we're considering, they kind of said, call a private company. So I called a private company or two, got a few quotes for them to come out and tell us what we would need to change if we moved into a rental space. And the quotes were anywhere from $400 to $1,000, and that's really prohibitive. So it'd be really great if the city had some, task force that would come out and look at spaces and tell us what needs to be improved before it becomes something that we're shut down for. Anything else? Another thing is looking at grants and funding. A lot of grants and loans are to individual artists or artists who are unaffiliated. We're an LLC, which we did in order to get a bank loan and protect ourselves legally, but it disqualified us from a lot of other funding. So perhaps opening up some avenues there, broadening LLC's ability to get some funds would be great.
What's the specific issue with the LLC that?
I think it was a lot of like Maryland arts grants that were targeted at individual artists rather than.
Okay.
So we applied as our LLC.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So other than that, it's frustrating because we have a well thought out business plan. We have a team of people that have a ton of experience running these spaces. We have 5 years of, projections that we can show to banks, and, we just need a building to start this business. We have a waiting list of about 40 bands. The need is there, so hopefully, I wanted to get up and introduce ourselves so that people can approach us and give us advice or point us in the right direction.
Can you be sure to leave your information so some of us who have ideas might be able to be in contact with you?
Yes, absolutely.
I think, the things that you're identifying are real concrete things that many, many people are facing, and so I really appreciate you sharing them out loud. Things like the conundrum of fiscal sponsorship, access, these are reoccurring questions. And so if you don't mind putting them in the survey form, just because we're trying, what the survey hopefully will do, will create a sort of archetype or several archetypes of different kinds of needs. So for example, there's groups like yours, there's individuals, there's families, there's elders, there's all kinds of very specific needs that go with different kinds of spaces or earning potential, or people that are just not interested in the same sorts of models. And so I think the things that you're identifying, if you can talk about those specifically, it just helps us with the back end work in creating that kind of profile. And then also, I think that, I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about it openly, there are a couple of models I think worth mentioning, just in the interest of transparency, or, that sacred.
So I mentioned it earlier, so some of you might have heard this already, but we're actually working with an organization called Partners for Sacred Places, and we're doing inventories of some historically sacred congregations who have lots of abundant space that's already up to code, and it's being inventoried for use, and there are already places that want to do partnerships. And I know sometimes artists are concerned that there might be issues of censorship in those places, but they've developed mission matches with really interesting, diverse partners, and we think it might be a way to use some of the existing real estate, helping the congregation who would be able to offer below market rate space, and also to generate some income for themselves as well. So I can share some information with you about that.
Great, that would be wonderful. After 2 years of searching for a building, we are open to any kind of opportunity, any kind of partnership, any kind of sponsorship, you name it.
I have somebody coming down in about 4 weeks who would be able to talk to you directly about it too.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, I'm not sure when you called the fire department exactly what you said to know why you got the response that you did, so I'm not sure if it was a building you were already in or one you were anticipating purchasing, but if you still need a how we want to say, a complimentary or a courtesy walkthrough, if it's an unoccupied something, I can probably still help you. Sometimes when people call and say, we're already in it, we need someone to come out, it kind of goes different ways, because once we come out, if there's an issue, then the people kind of are concerned. So I don't know how you worded it, but if you're still in need of a courtesy walkthrough on something that's not occupied, you can give us a call. Okay?
I sure will.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there other folks who have not signed up but who wish to speak? So we're at the end of our formal sign-up list. Pardon? Oh yeah, good. So Frank and I were conferring here. I mean, we said this event would is from 4 to 7. And I'm certainly not suggesting that anybody in the audience needs to stay, or that everybody in the task force needs to stay. Frank and I are willing and intending to stay in case folks wanted to come later. We did 4 to 7 so that people who are kind of on the early side and the late side could come depending on their work or family obligations. So those of you who are able to stay and would like to stay, that's fine. At least the 2 of us will stay so that we can engage with anybody else who needs to come and make sure that that is conveyed to the full task force. And I assume that the folks who are recording this will stay for the slot. Is that correct? No? until, I think, 'cause we are really set from 4 to 7. And I want to make sure that anybody who came here, who planned to come here tonight to be heard during those hours gets heard. Frank, anything you want to? Okay. So we'll sort of recess for now, for lack of a better, Dan, do you want to say something?
The after party for the meetings at the Crown tonight.
Drinks on you.
Drinks are on the task force. We're going to send the mayor the bill in about 6 months.
I do have a quick question for the audience members that brought up the issue that is sort of urgent, this idea of spaces being turned in or called or threatened. I just want to understand a little bit more about what's happening. So there's one idea that the fire department was looking to come to spaces, which we now have sort of dispelled that that's not specific, but that something else is happening around spaces receiving calls saying, I'm coming to inspect you, right? And I wanted to know what those calls are about in terms, and then what's the result? Are they getting inspected? Or I just wanted to hear a little bit more about it and what's actually happening.
Well, I got an email this morning about a space that I guess is getting a walkthrough on Wednesday. And that's the space I was speaking about in particular. And the people who notified me about it mentioned that there are several spaces that are in this situation. I don't know how this information is getting disseminated, but that's all I know. I also know, I'm not sure if people are familiar with people calling in and reporting spaces. There's a series of message boards of people who have political motivations to stop DIY spaces because they're quote-unquote havens of radical leftism or whatever. While those people might be insane, their phone calls are still logged just the same. And I don't know, I've also heard of reports of many spaces of people coming to their house who are not a part of the fire department claiming to be, and then them getting inspected a couple of days later when people come by to suss them out or something like that.
Getting the days later is by the fire department.
Correct. Again, I don't think the fire department has any motivations other than people's safety, and I believe that there is no list. I don't think you've got like, the map of art spaces, and soon it'll be mine. I don't think that's the case, but I do think places are getting inspected, and I do think, I don't know, I'm not going to speculate as to why, but they are. And that's the reality. We can come up with awesome reasons as to why they're being targeted. But they are certainly having walkthroughs, and there's certainly spaces that are on the line. And again, something we brought up earlier is these spaces exist, and they're not homes, and they're not just workspaces, they're not residential, and they're not industrial. It's a gray area. It's a completely new paradigm of space that doesn't exist. And I feel like until we can suggest something again, I just want to reiterate that I think the mayor should address this in days rather than months.
This is just more of an awareness kind of concept. So we discussed earlier that oftentimes we respond because there's complaints. And I just want to say this just in general. The things that draw complaints are excessive items outside of a structure, they draw attention. Wires coming in draw attention. People doing things that they would not normally do in a structure draw attention and complaints from within and without. So what I would just like to close and say, if you adopt safe practices, keep your property in a relatively safe condition, it can cut down on the complaints wherever they're coming from, because sometimes we'll get a complaint, it may just be a person's name at the bottom of the complaint, can you come out? And when I agree, we do get sometimes from people who live there saying, I've been to my landlord, we've asked them to repair something, they won't. So I'm just saying if we all work together to build a safe environment, it can be helpful to all. We don't look forward to the complaints, but I do want to share whatever you can do to make your place and your space safe, please do that. I think that would just be helpful to all.
Again, I think everyone wants their space to be safe, especially if they sleep in it at night. People like to go to bed feeling safe. I've lived in several unsafe spaces, and wish they had been safer, and it was out of my control. But again, I just want to go back to the point that we formed this task force because of what happened to the people at the Bell Foundry, and there's dozens of Bell Foundries in the city, and it'd be great to keep it that way.
Earlier, we proposed a recess of the task force because it didn't seem that there does not seem to be any others who have anything they would like to say. Again, we're here till 7. If we want to take a few-minute break for those who want to leave, could do so. But if anybody else has something they want to share, questions, comments, again, if you don't feel comfortable doing it here in this setting, go online to the website that we have available at the bottom of the flyer. Again, it's safeartspace@baltimore.gov. You can find, sorry, email address, I apologize. But you can send anything you want to share with us. You can also take the survey online. There are plenty of opportunities for you to share information with us if you would. Recess? Anybody?
Andrew, are we okay to do that? Anything else for you? You're fine. Okay, thank you. All right, thanks, everybody. Stick around if you can.